Okay, so we're talking about the West African empires. This is a longer section of the chapter. It's actually 4 sections to complete our unit on Africa. So this one is all about the West African empires. Today, we're going to specifically talk about Ghana. So 6.1 is the Empire of Ghana. The essential question, if you want to go ahead and open up your notes and type this in there, the essential question is, what caused the rise and fall of Ghana? So the Ghana Empire, like all the other empires that we have studied so far, the Roman Empire, the Islam Empire actually did exist and go on for quite a long time. However, we know that it ended up breaking up into smaller empires that eventually became other countries. So today we're going to take a look at the Ghana Empire and find out how did it rise to be a profitable and strong empire, and then why did it fall? Now, just to be very direct here, Ghana is still a country today. So even though the empire fell, part of the empire still remained intact to become the country of Ghana after basically Africa colonized. So let's go ahead and get started. Our first section is Ghana controls trade and how Ghana began. So go ahead and write this in your questioning column. How did Ghana begin to gain strength and power? So remember that when we talked about Africa at the beginning, they're all really just different African tribes. So they're all extended families, African tribes, and these tribes need to form a unit. These tribes need to come together as one in order to start an empire. Otherwise, they're still just little tribes and they're all doing their own thing, living under their own rule. So what ends up happening is that nomadic herders, remember a nomad is somebody that travels from place to place to place. Farmers were threatened by nomadic herders, and herders are just that. They literally are herding animals across the grasslands. And what ends up happening is, obviously, if animals are grazing in your farms, it's going to destroy your farms. So basically what they did is all of these extended families got to band together and come together for this common need, which was protection. And when they all came together as one solid uniform group, they grew in strength. So this is how Ghana began. They needed to band together. One of the other things that they discovered is they discovered a new technology of iron. So they found out that if you heat a specific kind of rock, the middle of the rock became molten, and that molten rock would harden into iron. And they were able to use iron for tools and weapons. Ghana is located along the Niger River. And what ended up happening is they were able to create these tools that were going to help them farm more efficiently and effectively, but also create weapons to help protect themselves. So what you're going to do, remember how I said earlier this week that we were going to start doing a little less of the fill in the blank, and you were going to start doing just a little bit more notes on your own. So after we finish the whole lecture, you're going to go back to this section. You're going to read Ghana's beginnings in your textbook, and you're going to add just 2 more notes from this section of reading. So trade in valuable goods. You're going to read page 31 and 32 and write your own notes for this section as well as the video on the next slide. The video on the next slide, you are going to watch this in class in full. So you'll watch it and add to this section of notes as well. So you'll have a combination of textbook notes and video notes for this section. And the link is on your notes, as well as the sub will give you the link and you'll watch it on the board. Okay, so you will watch that video in class. It's a little less than 5 minutes, so it's not going to take long. Let's move on to the next section here. So growth of trade. How did trade help Ghana develop? So make sure you have that in the questioning column. So we talked about this earlier this week as well. Trade in gold and salt is really what is going to make the African empire is very profitable. And remember that the more money you have, the stronger and more powerful you are. So power and money go together. The Ghana's rulers really became very powerful because of the amount of money that was coming in from the trade. They're going to, especially with gold, start trading for very highly valuable items. Salt also, because it was very versatile, salt was going to increase as well. So Ghana's rulers and their military began to take over trade from the merchants. So they realized that when the merchants are doing all the trading, that the rulers are getting less money. So the rulers who have control of the military are putting the military in charge of the trade and really taxing the merchants to the point where the merchants really aren't making any money and the rulers are becoming more wealthy. The other source of trade were sheep, cattle, and honey, as well as leather and cloth, which they also got from the animals. So they really learned to live off the land and were able to be very profitable with the things that they could get from the land and the animals. The capital of Ghana was Kumbai-Sole, and this was also the largest city and a great trade center. We talked about earlier this week that those small little villages, those little villages with the African tribes started growing and growing and growing as trade increased. Kumbai-Sole is no different. It became the largest city in West Africa as well as a great trade center. Okay, so you are going to read the section on taxes and gold. It's very, very short because this is one of the ways that unfortunately the people are going to get overtaxed and they're going to start rebelling against their government because of how much taxes they are getting put upon them. But go ahead and read page 133 in your textbook and create a question and add notes for this section in your Cornell notes. You could do that after the lecture is over. Expansion of the empire. So let's go ahead and add this question to your note or your questioning side of your notes. How do the rulers of Ghana control trade? So as I said before, they had the military starting to take over the trade, and by doing that, they were able to control where the money and the goods were going. So Ghana's kings built very powerful armies and began to conquer more land, specifically in areas of trade. They were conquering land specifically along the Silk Road because they want to be able to take over as much of that as possible. Remember, the more money you have, the more land you have, the more power you have. In order to rule such a strong and powerful empire, the Ghana kings allowed the kings of those conquered empires to stay on their land and help them rule. They did have to follow the orders of the king, but they were more like governors of their territory. So they had to follow the Ghana law, but underneath the Ghana king. But to their people, they were still in charge. They still got to keep their big fancy houses and castles and things that they built. The temples that they built, things like that, and they were able to keep a lot of their money and a lot of their goods, but they did have to answer to the king. And Ghana reached its power under King Tunka-Manen. Now, Tunka-Manen, he's this picture right here. He was a very, very elaborate man. He spent a lot of Ghana's money on very luxurious things. He wanted to have a lot of art around him. He wore, you can see in the picture here, he wore a lot of gold, very ornate clothing. He really lived a very luxurious life and unfortunately spent a lot of Ghana's money at the same time. So there's part of where we get to Ghana's decline. So you can see by the title of this section, invasion, overgrazing, and internal rebellion are the three reasons why Ghana declined. So let's go ahead and write why did Ghana decline in the 1000s? Go ahead and write that in your questioning column. So in the mid-1000s, Ghana was a very powerful and wealthy empire. Unfortunately, within 200 years, it will collapse. So the three major factors were invasion, overgrazing, and internal rebellion. So notice the question is the same for this whole section. So invasion. There was a Muslim group called the Almoravids, and they attacked Ghana in the 1060s. So remember that the Muslims helped the Berbers convert to Islam and controlled much of the Silk Road. So the Almoravids, this group of Muslims, they decided that they wanted to take some of that land back. And so they attacked Ghana in the 1060s. They tried to force the leaders to convert to Islam. This was one of the ways that they were basically saying, we will let you live if you show us that you are willing to convert to Islam. Remember that their religion and their spiritual traditions are animism. So there is no one God in their religion. Ghana fought against the Almoravid armies for 14 years and refused to convert to Islam. They eventually failed and the capital was destroyed. So just like we've talked about several times before, like with Rome and Constantinople, if your capital falls, your empire is going to fall because it is weakened from basically the inside out. The Almoravids cut off trade, and without that, Ghana could not support its empire. So they basically cut off their financial support. So let's talk about overgrazing. The Almoravids, when they moved in, they also brought many animals with them. And this is what caused overgrazing. And it's exactly how it sounds. The amount of animals that they brought with them basically ate all of the grasses in the pastures. They ate everything on the farms. The grasslands were suffering. And what ended up happening is they exposed this dirt to the sun and the wind, which stripped it of its natural elements, of its fertile elements. And so it was no longer good enough to farm. It wasn't fertile anymore. It was too dry. So the only thing the farmers could do was to leave. They had to leave because farming is the only thing they knew. They had to leave to go find land that was going to be able to be more fertile. This is possibly what the land might have looked like. You can see it's very cracked, it's very dry. It's not really farmable land. And the last part is the internal rebellion. So in 1200, the people of Ghana rose up and formed a rebellion. Remember how I said that the people were being overtaxed when they were trading. And Ghana's king Tukamenon at this time was just spending all of their money. And so the more money he spent, the more he taxed the people to raise more money. The rebels took over the empire, and it was too large to manage. And so unfortunately, the rebels, because they are not government officials, they really have no idea what to do to rule something this large. They fell to neighboring empires because they just really had no idea what they were doing. And it's much too large for even Ghana's king to manage, that he had to have governors. So these people, they're just ordinary people that were rebelling against the king, had no idea how to support such a large empire. And so it did fall to neighboring empires. Okay, so at this point, you guys know the drill. You're going to go back to those couple of sections I had you read and mark up your notes, or sorry, add to your notes from the sections you're supposed to read. You're going to watch the YouTube video on the Empire of Ghana and add to that section of your notes as well. Bold or underline vocabulary and keywords, highlight main ideas. Make sure you go back to the 2 sections that did not have questions and add questions, as well as the questions that I did give you. And then finally, answer the essential question about how did Ghana rise and fall? Make sure you answer that question within your summary. So make sure you do both. You need to say how it rose and how it fell within your summary. And that's it. That's the Empire of Ghana.